Would you rather own Ethereum, Bitcoin, or XRP? Let's go through the pros and the cons to each of these three cryptos. So first, of course, you have Bitcoin. Strongest security in crypto, right? It's the strongest crypto out there so far. The most decentralized crypto. Extremely hard to hack. It's never had a 51% attack. You can't change it. It's been the most solid crypto out there, right? Institutional acceptance, most successful ETF ever launched, even more successful than gold by leaps and bounds. I would also say it was trusted, right? I'd say it's trusted. I would also say, not also say it's a commodity. Like that's a fact. We know it's not a security. Digital gold narrative. There's only 21 million, so there's a very scarce supply, right? It's got the first mover advantage, first cryptocurrency ever created. So here's the positive, right? Talking about the cons though, definitely not built to scale, right? For utility. It's slow, it's clunky, especially compared to other chains out there that can do, millions of transactions per second, and Bitcoin can only do a handful. There's no smart contracts really on it. You can't really build them on it, right? Limited innovation, mostly a store of value, not ecosystem growth. High transaction fees, especially when it's congested. Right, when you think about a Bitcoin, a lot of people will argue, what does it have going for other than it's a store of value, right? But if you believe in a tokenized economy and a digital economy and an economy running on AI, you could see why that store of value narrative makes sense. It's a book you should read called The Bitcoin Standard, and let me grab it real quick. It'll explain why you might want to take a look at it. You can also find that in my Stan link in my bio. It'll bring you to to Amazon, I believe. So go read that book if you haven't. It's called The Bitcoin Standard. You can see it in the link in the bio. All right, moving on. You have Ethereum. Here's your pros. Largest smart contract ecosystem. The most protocols ever built were built on Ethereum. They're still being built on Ethereum. Ethereum also has the most TVL, which is money locked up for what we call DeFi. It's the top contract for NFTs, RWAs, stablecoins. They all run on Ethereum. Strong developer network, biggest crypto developer community, right? It is by far the largest community in crypto, right? In terms of developers, I would argue Bitcoin has the largest community in crypto, but in terms of developers. Institutional adoption is growing. ETFs have been approved. We all know that, right? It's used in tokenization. That's where the RWA and stablecoins are going to come into play. Big on DeFi. They right now have more than 50% of all, like I said, all of the DeFi world, DeFi world locked up on Ethereum. Flexible, a lot more flexible than Bitcoin, right? Smart contracts enable almost anything possible that we can do today. You can do on the blockchain on Ethereum. The cons are the scalability of it, though. It still relies heavily on layer 2 networks. That's like Polygon and other things like that. Matic, it was old Matic, now it's Polygon, whatever. Completely harder, or complexity is harder. I would say it's harder for institutions to fully integrate versus other systems out there. That's why Solana has been doing well. There's arguments of SUI, right? And depending on what you're trying to build, right? There's Ondo, right? So there's other places that you can go that are better than Ethereum. They're faster, right? But again, Ethereum has that institutional trust, right? It's never really broken down. It's been here a long time. Institutions do like that. It has a lot of liquidity on it. A lot of the liquidity out there, the money out there is on Ethereum. Competition, like I said, it's got a lot of competition. It's facing pressure from those cryptos that I just said, right? And it's gonna probably start facing pressures from XRPL as well, which brings me to my next one, which is XRP. Here's your pros. Focused on cross-border payments, designed for liquidity and settlement, essentially becoming the SWIFT layer of the blockchain. And if you understand, SWIFT transacts trillions and trillions of dollars a day through the banking system. Well, the banking system comes online. Are they going to use XRP? That's the big question. And it looks like they are, which would make our XRP explode, right, in price and value. It's very fast. It's very cheap. Cheaper than Ethereum, cheaper than Bitcoin, cheaper than most cryptos out there, cheap enough, right? We can talk about micro fractions of pennies and stuff like that. That's just where we're getting to in terms of cheapness. So it's definitely much cheaper than the current system that we're using today to transact money. Near instant settlement. I mean, you're talking within seconds, boom, it's there. So it's just as fast as what you're seeing today, if not faster, with what we're already using. Very low fees, like we talked about. Legal clarity. It's got legal clarity. U.S. court ruled XRP itself is not a security in secondary sales. And then when we get the Clarity Act, that could change all of this completely and really give XRP the final stamp that it needs for trillions to flow in, right? Real institutional integrations. Payment corridors are starting to use the Ripple XRP network. Countries are starting to test it. South Korea is starting to test it this week for their cross-border settlement and their banks and integration behind the scenes. In a world where we are becoming more and more tokenized, right? Now, there are these cons that it is more centralized than Bitcoin and Ethereum. Significant supply held by Ripple Labs. They own a bunch of the XRP. I think it's over 50% of it. More controlled than Bitcoin and Ethereum, so it's not decentralized, but I would say that you could also turn that into a pro as well, because governments are going to want something that they have somewhat control over, especially if you're talking about monetary system. They don't want it to be completely decentralized. You have the argument of decentralization versus centralization, and we're just going to the same system, just on a different system. And I get it, but if you want real adoption, you're going to have somewhat of a centralized authority in case something bad happens, or governments have to shut something down because they want control. And ultimately, for you to think that we're going to win. I mean, partially with Bitcoin and Ethereum, but they're going to put a lot of control into crypto, and XRP allows that. But it's also like institutional grade, right? So adoption still limited, right? Not as widely used by banks as people may assume, right? But that's because we don't have the Clarity Act. That's because the innovation is just starting. A lot of people think that we've been in crypto's been here for a long time. But if you go back and you look at Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, their stocks fluctuated for 10 years, 15 years before they really, really took off and went into the hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars. And they're already approaching fast $100 billion market cap, even in a bear market, right? So there's some plus and negative there. Regulatory uncertainty, not fully gone. We're still waiting on the Clarity Act, but I think we're going to be fine there. So there you go. There's your comparisons, right? Which one are you buying for the long term? Let me know in the comments. I own them all. There's one I like more than others, but you guys can figure that one out. I'm not telling you guys anymore. At the end of the day, if you want to know what I really like, you're going to have to go check out the Telegram. But hope that information helps you make a decision. Go and do your own research, you guys. Go and make sure that you look at this stuff. You type this stuff in on your AI systems. You ask it questions so you can make a decision for yourself. Hopefully I can just bring you into this space and give you the education needed and intrigue you to do so. Make sure you guys like, share, follow. We'll see you guys soon.